Alright, so now it says for numbers 7 through 14, fill in the blank. So you're not given a graph, you just have to apply the rules. Definitely pay attention to your pre-image versus your image. That's going to tell you what direction you're going in. Alright, so this first one, it says translate right 8 and down 3. So you just need to know that this is saying x plus 8, y minus 3, right? That's our algebraic rule. And then we're just going to apply this. So negative 6, right? If we were to do our math, negative 6 plus 8, that's x plus 8, and then 0 minus 3. That's our new point. And that would give us 2, negative 3. Alright, next one, and this is where it's good to just have your rules memorized. Reflect across the line y equals negative x. That rule is negative y, negative x. So that means they switch and they both change. So they're going to switch, right, and change. So it's going to become 3, negative 5. And again, that you just want to have that rule memorized. Y equals negative x is negative y, x. Next one, same thing. You want to memorize your rule. Rotate 180 around the origin. You actually use this up above in numbers 1 through 6. That just means they both change signs. So negative 8, 2 is going to become 8, positive 2. Dilate, also just I would have this rule memorized. Dilation, you're just multiplying, right? So this is 5 over 2 times x and 5 over 2 times y. Use your calculator if you need to. That would give me a negative 30. It's getting bigger. And 15 over 2, which is like 7.5. Now 11 and 12 are important because you'll notice they give you the image and they ask for the pre-image. So on these two, you need to do the opposite, right? You're going backwards. So anytime it talks about going from the image to the pre-image, you need to go backwards. So really, instead of going left 4 and up 6, you're going the opposite. So it's going to be right 4 and down 6. That's what you're going to apply to your point. So you're going to go right 4, so this is plus 4 and minus 6. So it's going to be 12, negative 7. Alright, and then same thing here. It's dilate by a scale factor of 1/3. Well, you want to do the opposite, so you're really going to do times 1/3. Right, so that multiply both of these by 1/3, and that gives you negative 3, 2. So really pay attention if it says the image. If it gives you the image, or it asks, right, this is asking for the pre-image. It wants to know the pre-image, you need to go backwards. And then the final one, they ask for the description, so they want you to give the description. So here, translate, you need to say right, left, up, and down. Right, so the question is, how do I go from 4 to 5? Well, that would be right 1. And then how do I go from 8 to 7? And that would be down, or sorry, I said the answer. Oops. How do I go from 8 to 1? Well, that's going to be down 7. Alright, and then finally, this one asks about rotating. So you need to figure out, okay, how do I go from, right, I started at 6, negative 2. How did I end up at 2, negative 6? Well, to me, it's pretty clear they switch, right? They switch. And then my negative 2 stays the same, right? So my y stays the same. But what happens to my x? Well, my x changes.
Attention teachers, staff, students, and guests.
Alright, let me find my place. Oh. On my screen, it disappeared. So that's exciting. Alright, sorry about that. It disappeared from my screen for a second. But we're back. So again, they switched, and then your x changed. So x, y became, they switched, and my x became negative. And you just got to know what that corresponds to. We actually saw it earlier, but that corresponds to rotation of 9. So you need, it says rotate. So rotate 90 degrees, you need the degrees. And then clockwise, you also need to say clockwise. You have to have both of those parts. All right, so that's just kind of knowing your rules, having your rules memorized, and then applying them. All right, 15 and 16, it says for each picture, describe the transformation in words and write an algebraic rule. Use the labels on the vertices to help you determine the transformation that occurred. Well, both 15 and 16, you should recognize right away that the shape has changed size. So anytime it changes size, it's a dilation. You have to pay attention, right? So in this one, you start at A, and this one you also start at A, but right, you start without the primes. You've got to pay attention to that. So in this one, if you start at A and you go to A prime, the prime one is clearly bigger. So it needs to be greater than 1. And then on this one, you start here and then you go to the primes. This one is getting smaller. So it needs to be less than 1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare, let's just do A versus A prime. So A is at -1, 2, and A prime is at -2, 4. So you need to ask yourself, alright, so you got to ask yourself, how do I go from -1 to 2 and 2 to 4? And luckily this one is pretty clear. You know you're getting bigger, so you can always just do what is 4 divided by 2, right? So my dilation is by 2. So for your description, you want to say dilate around the origin by a scale factor of 2. And so xy becomes 2x and 2y. Going to do the same thing over here, but now again this one's getting smaller, so it's got to be less than 1. So again, this is -1 and 2. This A prime would be -1 and 2, and A is going to be 2, 4. So now how do I go from 2 to 1 or 4 to 2? And same thing here, it's going to be 2 over 4, which is 1/2. So you're going to say dilate by a scale factor of 1/2 around origin. And your rule is 1/2 x and 1/2 y. So this one says the two diagrams above are a little different. How are they different? And how did that affect your answer? Well, one is getting bigger and one is getting smaller. So just as I stated up there, if it's bigger, it's greater than 1. If it's smaller, it's less than 1. So you saw that with 2 and with 1/2. Alright, I paused this video a long time ago and I'm not sure where I ended. So I'm just going to pick back up on 17. I'm just talking, it says the two diagrams above are a bit different. How are they different? And again, you just have to pay attention to where you start, right? Start with the small triangle and get bigger, so your scale factor is going to be bigger than 1. And then in number 16, you start with the big triangle and then you get smaller, so your scale factor is less than 1. So really pay attention to your primes and to which diagram you start with. All right, let's get into 18 and 19. So first one says describe in words. So what I'm going to do is to figure out kind of what's happening, I'm going to look at 2 points. I'm going to compare 2 points. I know it's not a translation because it's like the shape's been moved, right? It's not the same direction. To me, it looks like a rotation just because B, if you can kind of see, has been rotated to the right. But let's just take a look at what's going to happen. So A is at -1, 1, 4, and then B is at A prime is at -4, -1. Right, so if I compare these two, A and A prime, what's happened? So I have negative 1, 4 and negative 4, negative 1. Well, they've definitely switched. And then you'll notice the negative 4 stays the negative 1 stays the same. But right here in A, it started as positive 4, and now that's changed to negative 4. So they switch, and your Y value becomes negative. So I did my algebraic rule first. So again, they switch, and my Y became negative. Now, because I know my rules, all right, I know that this is a rotation of 90 degrees counterclockwise. You need all three of these parts: rotation, the degrees, and the direction. All right, so all three parts are important. And again, this means you're rotating to the left, and that makes sense. Here's A, then A ends up over here. And then 19, again, you can start. To me, what gives this one away is A and A prime. If you notice, they are directly across from each other. So anytime they're like directly across from each other, that's a good indication that it's a reflection. Again, I'm going to just look at 2 points. So I'm going to look at A and A prime. And A is at, negative 1, 4. So same as last time, negative 1, 4. And then we have negative 4, positive 1. So what's happened here? Negative 1, 4, negative 4, 1. So they've switched, and then you should notice that both of the signs change. So my algebraic rule is negative y, negative x. And again, if you know your rules, that is our reflection. Just based on knowing our rules, that's our reflection over y equals negative x. So that's why it's important to have those memorized. You can draw this line in and just check yourself, right? So y equals negative x. We did this one in class. It goes through the origin, and my line's definitely not going to be straight, so please forgive that. But you can tell, the line's terrible, but you can tell, right, these points have been reflected over that line. And number 20 says, look at the 2 diagrams above. How could you tell which one was the reflection and which one was the rotation? Well, I talked about this when I was doing them, right? The reflection, the points are across from each other. The points, are across from each other. And then with the rotation, again, you can tell they've been rotated, but they're not shifted, but they've been like, it's kind of, I think of it as spinning. It's been spun, spinning, rotating, right? The points aren't across from each other. So I know it's kind of like self-exploring to say rotating in a rotation, but again, they've moved kind of like in a circular motion. All right, so that's your quiz review. Make sure you know how to do these things if you want to pass the quiz. Good luck.